Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016. How aware are you really? It's been almost a decade since the Rights of Persons with Disabilities RPwD Act 2016 came into being, and the path to this legislation took India nearly 4 decades. In the early 1970s, voices began demanding rights of people with disabilities, but it was nowhere close to being a movement at that point. Until then, most people who had any kind of disability were mostly considered as outcasts. Imagine living in a world where disabilities were seen as punishment for past sins or one's karma. Up until that point, this was a grim reality in India. For centuries, society viewed them as liabilities who had to be dependent all their lives. However, changes came slowly as conversations about human rights began, breaking the silence around these injustices. The human rights approach to disability emerged in 20th century following the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. This declaration affirmed that all individuals, regardless of their differences, undeniably have civil, political, economic, social, cultural and development rights. Despite this, the sympathetic nodding and poor being perceptions did not end at that point. In the year 1995, India's first comprehensive legislation came as the Persons with Disabilities Equal Opportunities, Protection of Rights and Full Participation Act. Though it was a significant step forward for its narrow definitions, limited recognition of disabilities and poor implementation, the Act was criticized. This was followed by the more comprehensive Act of 2016, which absorbed not only a wider approach to disability but emphasized the social model of disability, very close in form and spirit to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities (UNCRPD), which was first ratified by India. The Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act RPwD Act 2016 is the landmark legislation towards creating an inclusive society where equal opportunities and a level playing field for persons with disabilities are not just ideals but realities across the nation. The RPwD Act formalizes many principles and practices that have been embraced by the most aware persons and organizations in the country, strengthening efforts and providing a robust legal framework that reinforces our advocacy and inclusion. The Act emphasizes on accessibility, inclusive education, and equitable employment that needs to be followed by the country at large. The RPwD Act broadened the scope of disability, recognizing 21 disabilities as compared to 7 of the previous Act. It expanded the definition of disability by including a wider range of conditions such as autism, cerebral palsy, multiple sclerosis, and acid attack victims. It guarantees several rights to persons with disabilities, including equality and non-discrimination, protection from cruelty and inhuman treatment, and access to justice. The Act underscores the right to inclusive education, ensuring that children with disabilities have access to free education in an inclusive environment. It mandates that educational institutions should provide reasonable accommodation and support services to facilitate learning. It also emphasizes the importance of adult education, making way for individuals with disabilities to have access for continuing education opportunities. Another important feature of the Act is the promotion of employment opportunities for persons with disabilities. It reserves 4% of government jobs for persons with benchmark disabilities and mandates private sector employers to adopt inclusive practices. It requires all public buildings, transport system, and information and communication technologies to be made accessible to persons with disabilities. It provides for social security measures including healthcare, rehabilitation, and recreational facilities to ensure that persons with disabilities can lead a life of dignity and independence. This is a significant step towards creating an environment conducive to the participation of persons with disabilities in all aspects of life. The RPwD Act has brought light to lives of individuals with disabilities and their families. The Act reminds us that disability is not necessarily about people who are born with it, but also anyone who acquires disability at any point in their lives. It ensures that children with disabilities have access to inclusive education, reasonable accommodations, and support services. It affirms that individuals with disabilities have space in areas such as employment, transportation, higher education, and beyond. While stereotypes and issues surrounding disability have not fully faded, the rights ensured by the RPwD Act remain strong and high. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development pledges to leave no one behind, which says that persons with disabilities must be both beneficiaries and agents of change. It begins with an open mind. While the RPwD Act itself is a powerful tool for creating an inclusive society, it also requires collaborative efforts from all sectors of society, government, non-profit organizations, and public to ensure its effective implementation. Let's keep our minds open and our actions resolute in ensuring that rights of persons with disabilities are not just recognized but realized.